Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
This year's budget projections, on a nominal growth of 10%, the target is 12% overall tax growth. So the question is it ending up putting undue pressure on the taxman? Is that resulting in some degree of harassment? Is there a unrealistic projection made in terms of how the economy is going to go? Are we not reading the economy, the signs of slowdown that well?
So, in a very ideal situation where there are no evasion, let's say as a student of mathematics, if the economy is growing at 10%, then your tax collection should also grow by 10%. If it is an ideal situation, right? If we have had no tax evasion, but then the fact remains that all of us know that that the level of compliance has to improve, and therefore the question of tax buoyancy comes. That what is that extra over the normal growth rate? That is what they say ki tax buoyancy, that to that extent our buoyancy should increase. So, what we have presumed is 1.2%, which is not very unrealistic, in the sense that if you see that if economy grows at 10%, the tax should grow at 12%, and which we think that yes, and that is without any overreach.
The buoyancy this year is 0.5. The projection. It was 0.5 in the current year. At least the numbers in the budget. So it's a huge jump from there.
No, 0.5. I don't think it was 0.5. If you see the tax buoyancy in this year in the sense 1920. The 1920 we had estimated somewhere around growth of around nominal growth rate around 12, 13, 14%, and there we had estimated our tax growth at somewhere around 17-18%, right. So, again it was 1.3 or something. Now, the nominal growth rate in this current year 1920 has come down, and therefore, our tax collection will come down, and of course, another thing is this corporate tax cut. So, because of that the growth will be lesser. But for the for 2021, if the economy that we are estimating that it is going to grow at 10%, then 12% growth rate is not overestimate, not unreasonable.
And the two measures that you mentioned, the corporate tax cut, the fact that it was implemented in the middle of a year when most corporates would have already sort of done their planning for that particular year, was that a desperate move, and the income tax rejigging that you've done, the optional rates that you've given, doesn't it overcomplicate things?
Normally such things are done at the time of budget. But when we found that our economy needs certain special measures, particularly in the month of July, then a consensus view was taken by the government, by us, that why wait till this budget, in the sense that if we have to do something and we have to do something long term, then we said that look, so we issued an ordinance, and later on we converted that into the act, and then we gave this benefit right from the 1st of April itself. So, it was a kind of a beneficial retrospective legislation, where we said that even though we brought down we issued an ordinance in the month of September, but then we said that the benefit will be applicable right from the 1st of April. Now, the personal income tax rate, the various slabs. So, in my opening remarks I mentioned that look, this does not create any complication. Today the way you file your income tax return, you have to just enter your income. It is the utility, this Excel sheet which income tax department issues. Everybody files an electronic return. You do not have to actually calculate, you have to just put your income there, and then it is a system which calculates 5%, 10%, 15%, 20%, that is how it is done. And that is what the most modern economy. So, it is a very scientific one.
Every year your government and previous governments also been talking about how tax terrorism is going to be fixed. And and yet if you look at the number of cases of tax under dispute, that keeps rising, and it's rising in this government as well. So why doesn't the tax board, whether it's the direct tax board or the indirect tax board, why don't you start evaluating on your own the orders given by tax people and just say that some of these, so you're expecting them to be resolved under these amnesty scheme. Why can't the tax board just say that I've seen this order, it's a bad order, and we're just removing all the cases due to this?
No, this is a very good suggestion. We conducted an exercise just before the budget, and in this budget we have come up with this Vivad se Vishwas scheme. Now, this is a beginning in the sense that we have already introduced a bill in the parliament, and we have further made it more attractive by moving an amendment even to that bill. So, hopefully that bill will be discussed in the parliament in the first week of March, and then if the parliament passes the bill, then that will become the law of the land. Now, what does the bill say? The bill says that if there is an appeal or dispute pending anywhere, whether it is before the Commissioner Appeal or ITAT or High Court or Supreme Court or arbitration within the country or outside the country, if the department has won at some level, then pay only 100% tax, no interest, no penalty. If the assessee has won and we have gone in appeal, then pay 50% and get rid of this. So, that is one part. Hopefully, a large number of people, going by our experience in the Sabka Vishwas scheme in the indirect tax, large number of people will take the benefit of this. But then the point that you were mentioning is very valid, in the sense that let us say takes care of the dispute now, but what happens to the future dispute? Because again next year, supposing the same dispute happens. So, we have identified about 20 issues on which the maximum number of dispute occurs, and it occurs every year. Because if there is a dispute and then the matter is pending in the Supreme Court, then the same till the Supreme Court decides that addition will keep on happening, and then the dispute can go on arising. So, we have prepared a list of those about 20 cases, and after the end of this dispute we are going to the Supreme Court, and there we will request Supreme Court saying that these are the 20 issues, and then give us the final verdict, so that actually completes the entire chapter, because we have identified 20, and that actually leads to would account for about 70-80% of the disputes. So, that is what we will have to do that. And when we said about the proactive, so this is something which the department needs to do.
One thing which we have seen in the last 3-4 budgets is about this customs duty being imposed on several items. This year also you have put about 20 items with higher duties. So there is a gradual streak of protectionism which the government seems to be practicing over the last two years at least. Does the government realize that such protective walls are not really a great idea for an economy which wants to open up and be part of the larger global supply chain?
In this budget itself, we have reduced the custom duties on the raw material. We have also removed anti-dumping duties on the raw material. So, our general principle is that if a raw material, if it is not available in the country, or if any inputs, there should be a minimum barrier in terms of the custom duty or these things. So, there should be minimum this. Now, so far as the finished products are concerned, in case of our finished products, we have to take a very, very balanced view, that we want that in our country those manufacturing should be set up, but that does not mean that our companies should be if let us say if there are some inefficient industry, they should be protected. But what happens is that particularly about the finished products, where we are also becoming competitive, but in this world where let us say certain we have seen that from many countries lots of hidden subsidies are given in those countries, they operate in a very, very different environment, and the finished goods in some areas they enter our country at a price which is highly uncompetitive. And if we at this point of time, if we do not balance this with an appropriate amount of customs duty, ultimately the domestic manufacturing and then the make in India also will have to be protected. So, that is the kind of a fine balancing exercise. One is that custom duty on a finished product should be such that it encourages make in India, but at the same time protect the interest of the final consumer, because ultimately, so we have to keep doing this fine balancing act, and that is the exactly the exercise what we have done in this budget. For example, you may have seen that we have said that mobile phone manufacturing, for example. So, we in the beginning we said that all parts of this mobile phones, they will be imported without duty, but we want that those parts also should get manufactured in India, because those parts cannot continue to be imported for all times to come. So, someday India will have to, there has to be some incentive or for people to make parts, those parts here.
But some of these tax shops haven't really haven't really given the desired benefits. For instance, for wafer manufacturing, there's been this policy that's been on, but not a single facility has come up. Even in mobile telephony, the whole focus seems to be assembly and not really manufacture. I don't think that the value chain has really been set up. So everything is coming in from China or wherever else, and it's being manufactured here. So is the duty intervention enough to spur manufacturing, or there has to be something more concrete there?
Duty intervention is just one part of the entire measures. This is my personal view, that duty alone cannot solve all the problems, because and sometimes many people with including people in the government at the different point of times, somehow we the people is to feel that if you increase or decrease duty, and then you can determine guide entire your public or investment policy based on that. That is not correct. We have to consider whether this kind of a duty is actually proving to be a bottleneck. To that extent, you should facilitate. So, duty could be a facilitator, but cannot actually will replace need for other initiatives. For example, corporate tax reduction. Now, if you have reduced corporate tax rate, somebody can ask question that whether this can alone bringing the required amount of investment in the country. The answer obviously is no, because you have to have some other policy, like you have to let us say the various kinds of permissions one is required to take before starting any industry. For example, getting the land, getting the environment certificate, getting the the water availability, getting the power at the at an appropriate rate. So, all those things will have to be done. So, and that I am very sure that the concerned ministries will be tasked to do this, and they they need to work on those directions. But one of the major bottlenecks, which used to be the taxation part, we have tried to address this.
So I have few questions about the budget announcement of Vivad Se Vishwas scheme. Firstly, it's a completely voluntary scheme. It's yet to be rolled out, but the targets have been fixed for the field formations. The performance targets have been, the appraisal has been linked to it. So isn't it undue pressure for field formations? Secondly, do you expect the bigger cases to come under the scheme like Vodafone and Kane? And thirdly, the last scheme we saw for service tax dispute, Sabka Vishwas, the gross amount has been higher. Is it true that the net amount has been much lower than the gross amount that you have collected in it?
This Vivad Se Vishwas scheme is voluntary. Of course, it is voluntary, because any tax dispute settlement scheme has to be voluntary. It is before the parliament, and then the parliament, once the parliament passes this will become a law, and then we have also started doing advanced preparation, in the sense that preparing the list, assessing officer wise. The total number of cases which are involved in the dispute is close to around 5 lakhs. We have officers, assessing officers close to around 10,000. So, let us say each assessing officer will have about 50 cases to that extent. Now, what we have told the department and the assessing officer is that please prepare a list of those 50 cases. Proactively go and facilitate the taxpayer, saying that look, if you want to take advantage of this scheme, please come and do this. To that extent, certain the objective has to be defined for each assessing officer, because if we, let us say, in this entire government system, if you do not mention anything, and then what happens is that, let us say, if I am a taxpayer, I want to avail this scheme, I do not know where to go, and if I go to some officer, he says, I do not know, right. So, we do not want that kind of a situation. We want that our officers should proactively, they should go and talk to the taxpayer without the taxpayer coming to them, saying that look, this is the scheme, and then the you please take advantage of this. It is completely voluntary for you, but if you want any assistance from us, we are there to give you the assistance, and to that extent, we have defined there the performance expectation. I mean, whether you call it as a target, and this is what we expect. For example, let us say a private company, I will give you an example. Now, the private companies, the sales force, they also have been given certain expectation that you will increase your sales to that to that level, but that does not mean that they will start going and pressurizing somebody to buy that thing. They will only facilitate, they will make that whole system available so that their transaction becomes very, very smooth. So, similarly, if any company or any taxpayer, if he wants the dispute to be settled, we want that his transaction with the department should be frictionless. He should feel that yes, here is, otherwise tell me what will happen. The taxpayer wants to settle his dispute, then he will say according to him the dispute is X amount, but the department will say no, your amount is much 5x, then he will run away, right. So, the whole exercise is that to make this entire exercise extremely the facilitative, and that is why all these protocols have been laid, but it can't be said that this is to put pressure on the department, and then if we put the pressure on the department, then they will go and harass people. Of course, that is not the intention, and that can never be tolerated. If the department people try to use this to try to do any overreach, we will have a means to deal with such situations.
The SEZs are going to, the sunset clause coming to an end. And now I was talking to some companies, they are saying that they are in talks with Vietnam. Vietnam is luring them with to come and invest there, set up their campuses there, and they are very actively considering. These are big companies that I am talking about. Now, how are you looking to extend that? What is the thought process on that? Because I think March 2020 is the deadline for that.
If my memory serves right, sometime in 2016 that the sunset will arrive in 2020. Accordingly, all these companies, they had a choice, and they had to organize their affairs in such a manner that any unit which is set up till 2020 March, they will continue to get exemptions for whatever 15 years, so that is there. And once a sunset has been announced so much time before, and if we are going for this exemption free regime, I think from the stability of taxation policy point of view, right, I think if the sun has set, then the sun has set, right. I mean, it is not like in one of those right, and not like one of those the legends where Krishna Bhagwan goes and tries to block the sunrise or sunset, right. We can't get into that kind of a situation. So, the sun has set, the sun if the at least at the official level. See, I can only speak for myself, right. I mean, this is the stated policy of the government.
This is about the tax, the new tax on LRS remittance. Now, one, isn't it double taxation? Two, is the idea to discourage Indians from going abroad for travel or education?
See, first of all, the LRS, I will give you a little bit of background. The total, this is the liberalized remittance scheme, which are usually not tied to any commercial or other activities. The people can send up to $250,000 every year, almost freely. You have to just go to the bank and do this. Now, the total remittance under LRS in 2009-10 used to be about 780 million US dollars. Now, in 10 years it has grown up to 16 billion US dollars. This much money is going abroad, and there is nothing wrong with this. But when we were doing analysis, we found that a large number of people sending huge amount and not filing income tax returns, or showing a very disproportionately lower income. Let us say, supposing if I have sent 1 lakh US dollars. Now, usually, forget about some exceptions, but that person should be paying, maybe in the income tax range of around 20-25 lakhs, right. Otherwise, why would you send 1 lakh US dollar? Even if you have taken loan from a bank, let us say, sometimes they say that I have taken loan from the bank, but the bank would not give you a loan of 1 lakh dollars unless until your income was in that range, or some underlying income. So, this is like a TDS, this 5% is a TDS. So, you send the money, pay 5%, and then when you are paying for your advance tax in that quarter, you can make adjustment. Let us say, you sent 1 lakh dollars, and then 5% will be, the $5,000, so about 3,50,000. Suppose in that quarter, if you were supposed to pay 4 lakhs rupees as an income tax based on your total income of that year, then 3.5 lakh rupees you have already paid. So, you have to just pay that extra 50,000. So, this is not an additional tax, this is just a kind of the TDS. For example, when your employer deducts, when it pays your salary and when deducts tax, it is not an additional tax. This much tax, you can TDS, you can take credit, when you file your income tax return. So, this is what we thought, that in this manner we will be in a position to, because some kind of a hawala, some money laundering, various things used to happen. So, we found in this manner we can try to put a curb. Sometimes the suggestion was made to us that that who has sent from which bank account, why do not you go and catch them. Now, again the question is that if the numbers were, let us say 1 or 2%, I could have gone and caught them. But if I find that a large majority of people, if we are not, there is mismatch. So, going and catching and issuing notice would happen in case of if the numbers of the asymmetry is very less. But if the asymmetry is very wide, then can I start issuing notices in lakhs of people, and then say you come and explain, and then the people will say ki bhai mera to idhar hai ye sab cheezein hai. The whole idea is that you pay this tax, right, and then you go and do this. In fact, I will extend this argument that when your tax salary is paid, the TDS is collected. Somebody can say that why are you asking me TDS? I will file my returns and at that time I will pay. Why subject me to TDS? The whole idea is to ensure that most of the people remain in that disciplined regime where they continue to pay tax as per their expected income.
So on GST compensation, the law itself says that you have for the next 5 years, for 5 years since GST, you will take care of 14% growth rate from the base year and compensate states. Now there is a GST compensation cess also, which the government has said that now it will restrict itself to the cess amount that is collected in the cess, through the cess. Now, if the growth rate, if whatever the difference doesn't match up to what is available in the cess, how do you take care of that?
You have to see what the constitution provides so far the compensation is concerned, and what the compensation law provides. So, after lots of deliberation, the constitution was amended and the compensation law was passed by the parliament, which has been accepted by all states and the union territories, including the central government. What does this compensation law say? Compensation law says that at the 14% growth, and then if there is any shortfall, which will be met by the compensation fund, and that is exactly what the Compensation Act says. Now, if there is a shortfall in the compensation cess, now the shortfall can happen on account of two reasons. One is that my overall collection hasn't matched 14%, maybe because the economy didn't grow up to that level. So, the compensation, your tax collection didn't grow that far, and therefore, you have a gap that you couldn't collect that much base revenue. So, your base revenue was much lower than 14%. Your compensation requirement was very, very high, right, and you do not have enough money in the compensation fund, and this is exactly what you are asking. Now, the answer is given in the compensation law itself. So, therefore, when you said that the government has said that it will restrict, it is not that the government has said this, it is what the compensation law says this. The compensation law says that compensation will be paid only out of the compensation fund. So, whatever money comes into the compensation fund, only that money will get paid. Now, if there is a shortfall which is more than what compensation fund is giving, then it is the GST council which has to take a decision that what measures it can take to either increase the compensation cess amount or consider about the rates.
Secretary Sahab, I want to ask you a question on the bank account details we have got from abroad via automatic exchange. All this came in September from Switzerland and several other countries. My question is, from then to now, what progress has been made? My information is that there are about 10 lakh accounts that have come to us, and it's gone to risk assessment. But do we by now know how many we want to act upon?
We have signed automatic information exchange. Now currently more than 90 countries, we are providing information, and they are also providing information about our citizens, and we are providing to those countries the information about their citizens. Now all those informations have come, and in fact this year is the second year where this automatic exchange information has come. Now what we have to do now, and that is what the current exercise is, that if it, let us say, if it is an Indian citizen, now Indian citizen can fall into a various classes. Completely non-resident, he is not residing in India, he has some bank account abroad, right. Then if he is not a resident of India, then he is not supposed to disclose that account to us. Now, the second class of Indian citizen would be that Indian citizen having some bank account abroad, and he is also a resident in India, where he is actually filing income tax return, and every income tax return, as you may have noticed, that it has a schedule of foreign assets, where he is supposed to disclose his foreign assets, and that is where we will actually match. So, this whole process of matching is going on, and on that basis every year what we do is that by the end of September, October, every year we are selecting certain cases for audit and scrutiny, and that is where for example, last year we selected certain few lakh cases for audit and scrutiny. It is based on various things, the cash withdrawal within our own country, the huge amount of depreciation claimed, all those anomalies, like for example, the major amount under the LRS. So, and this foreign information that we received from the foreign countries are also used as one of the inputs which selects us, which allows us to select the cases for scrutiny. And there also we also consider this some kind of a proportion. For example, let us say a lot of people who are actually moving from abroad and coming to India, he may be having a bank account where he may be having only few $100s in the bank account, but that also gets reported to us, right. So, there we see that all right, I mean this is a case where few $100s are there. To that extent, should we go and issue a notice?
How big a concern is a slowdown within the ministry at the moment?
The growth rate, of course, is is lower than what we had expected. But if you look around the world, and today the work is to the whole world is so integrated that to keep a very a different view, that the whole world there is a different trend and India will take a completely different trend is not very wouldn't be a very practical approach. So, what we have said is that this is how the situation in the world is, and our country is growing at this level. what we need to do within our own country to ensure that we continue to grow at a higher level. And then the amount of interventions that we have made during the last 6-7 months, in the various sectors, be it exports, be it the various other economic measures that we had to undertake. Those measures, and including in this budget, these are essentially to go for to spur growth, and in spite of the fact that there is a worldwide trend of a lower growth, how we can beat that trend and we can achieve a higher growth.